We've all made some mistakes. Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 43 of the Gamer Crafting Podcast. I am sitting outside, crunched into a corner of my balcony. I'm recording at a different time of day than I would normally. My normal schedule of things has gotten completely out of whack this week, and there was no bringing it back. There's no resurrecting it. I just have to suck it up and and just deal. So I'm recording at a much different time of day, and it's like way too sunny inside. I'm unable to get the camera to focus, and it's also really sunny everywhere else in the balcony, so I'm like crushed into the corner, and I've strategically placed my my empty hanging flower pots to like block some of the light. As you can see, there's still some glares happening, but I'm sorry, I did my best. Hopefully once I have plants in these boxes, it'll make it a little bit easier. In any case, this week I wanted to talk about some of my biggest kind of fails in crafting, things that taught me, important lessons when it comes to knitting and crochet specifically. It's been a bit of a wild week. I've been trying to reorganize things. I mentioned that a little bit last week, and I'm working on doing some planting. It's still a little bit early to be planting stuff outside, even though the weather has been unseasonably good. I'm still a bit nervous that the second I plant stuff outside, it's gonna freeze. So a lot of my little tiny baby seedlings are still inside in their little covered thing, and I will hopefully be getting a few more things planted in there before I bring them out here. I'm almost finished with my framework bralette. I just have to fix the straps and graft them together, and then it'll be ready to go. So hopefully I will be able to show that to you next week. I know that there is some noise from the road. I can't stop it. Even if I was recording inside, you'd still be able to hear it because all the windows and stuff are open to keep it from being 8 billion degrees in there. Because I am cooking yarn inside today, I am keeping an eye on it through this window that's behind the camera. So, I have done a bit of knitting this week. I have done a bit of crochet as well, but I'm super not convinced by it. I didn't even bring it out here to show you because I'm so waffly on it. I chose a simple ripple pattern crochet for my Light in the Darkness Rainbow Club this year, and I'm not feeling it. I don't love how it's looking. I don't love how the colors are pooling. I don't think that it shows off the yarn well, and so I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do. I had decided that I did want to crochet this year, but in retrospect I shouldn't have chosen chunky, but it's too late. We're months in now. But I'm not sure if I want to just pull out what I have and maybe pick a slightly different pattern, or whether I just want to suck it up and just keep going and hopefully I'll grow to love it. I'm unsure, but I feel like a decision on that is lingering around the edges somewhere. I feel like it's gonna happen. Anyway, so we've all learned hard lessons when it comes to knitting and crochet. We've made things that we've pulled out. In fact, I don't even have some of my biggest fails to show you because they have been banished. They've been banished to the kingdom of somebody else take this off my hands before I set it on fire, or they have banished to the kingdom of Sarah, please unwind this for me, because if I have to do it, I'm gonna cry. My very first knitting project was a sort of like a boucle yarn. I have no idea why I chose that for my first project. This was like over a decade ago. It was my very first project. In fact, it was like it was probably like 13 years ago, actually. So well over a decade ago. I chose this awful yarn. I mean, I'm sure it's fine in other contexts, but as for a beginner knitter, it was sucky. When you're not even really sure where your stitches are, it was just trash bad. I had to spend hours and hours and hours untangling this yarn because it was forever getting tangled, because boucle is like the sort of fluffy string and it's just bad. And my stitches were all over the place and it was horrendous. I never finished that project. Who the hell knows what happened to it? Probably, I don't know, ended up in somebody's basement as like a weird pot. Actually, I think I ended up just stopping it earlier and being like, it's a weird pot holder. Yeah. You'll probably see me be a little bit squinty, is because even though I'm backed into the corner, it's still really bright out here. Anyway, so that was my very first project. It didn't go well. It did not go as planned. I can't show it to you because that was 13 years ago and who the hell knows where it ended up. I don't know. I'm always amazed by people who pick up knitting or pick up crochet and the first thing that they make is like super cute and it looks exactly as intended, and that's never been the case for me. I always have like some really horrible, monstrous looking things that look like Dr. Frankenstein created them. It's bad. The second thing that I made with knitting, I can't even remember what it was. I think it may have been oh no, I do remember. It was a purple scarf and it was made out of, it was probably like a Michael's brand, maybe Michael's brand yarn. I don't even know what Michael's brand yarn is called anymore. I don't remember. Something along those lines. So like a big box yarn. I bought it at the craft store and I just made like a big purple scarf. It was fine. It was a garter stitch scarf. It was kind of uneven. It was fine. I have no idea where that has ended up. I've moved many times since that was a created thing, so I don't know. I'm unsure. So I remember I didn't knit for a little while after that. I was like, cool, I'm not sure that knitting's my thing. Gonna give it a rest. So I didn't do very much knitting for a while. And then I worked in Canada, where I was the assistant manager of a Michael's, actually, in Canada at this craft store. And I was the only one who knew anything about yarn or knitting or crochet or anything. And so because I was the only one who worked at the store who knew anything, they just kind of like decided that I was the expert for the whole department. And so I had to do loads of research and reading up on things because otherwise people would ask me questions and I wouldn't know what to tell them. And I hated feeling like that. That is something that just makes me feel just super unhelpful and really uncomfortable. So I did lots of research to at least learn things like needle sizes and how to like match needles to yarn and, you know, some popular trends and fiber blends and how to wash things, because these were, you know, kind of common questions I would get. So I learned a lot more. I started knitting a bit more. I think I made some hats. I think I made a hat for me. I'm pretty sure I made a hat for Sarah. I think I made a couple of cowls. Again, big box yarn, which is why I'll never have shade for people who are like, oh, well, that's all I use, because, man, I was on a budget. I didn't have hand-dyed yarn budget then. I mean, I still don't sometimes, even now, even though I hand-dye my own yarn. If it's not mine, then, you know, it's still a treat. So I had to do loads of research, and I was knitting here and there. I was starting to experiment with some other things, starting to kind of think more about, you know, different stitch patterns, but I still wasn't doing anything too elaborate. I still wasn't venturing into anything too much. I did spend a lot of time on Ravelry, but it was more me looking for patterns that I felt like I could take on, and there weren't many that I felt like I could take on confidently. So I'm pretty sure I also made like a scarf or a cowl and a hat for a friend of mine out of, I think it was James C. Brett, the Marble Chunky. And I did cables, and I was really proud of myself that I did cables, and sent it off, and she loved it, and that was great. And then we moved to Ireland. We lived in Ireland and Dublin for 6 months, and because I was super broke, I never ended up at This Is Knit, which is one of the big, or not like big, but, you know, popular local yarn stores in Ireland. I don't know if I bought any yarn in Ireland. We were on such a strict, tight, just stressful budget, because I don't know if you know this, but the housing situation in Dublin is dire. We were spending an inordinate amount of money for this tiny one room, had to share a kitchen with, I think, 9 other people, which is just stressful and bad. So I don't think I bought any yarn in Ireland because we were on such a tight budget. So I had some yarn that I had brought with me, acrylic, big box yarn, because again, didn't have any money for hand-dyed or even 100% wool yarn. Like, even that seemed like a step too high. So I don't even know what yarn. Look, I've just discovered even now that there's a drop stitch as I'm looking at this failed project I'm about to show you. I don't even know what yarn this is. If you recognize it, let me know. I'm usually pretty good with recognizing yarns, but I cannot for the life of me remember what this is. It's definitely acrylic, I can tell you that for feeling it. But this is a project that I made when we were in Dublin, and it was like my first there's some eyelets in here. So for me, that would have felt like quite stressful. That would have felt quite difficult and challenging. So I knitted this whole thing and then got to the end, and so this is meant to be like, I can't remember what the pattern was for it. I can tell you 100% certainty it was definitely a free pattern, and it was probably from one of the big yarn companies is my guess. I'm almost positive it wasn't an indie designer. Not that it matters, because everything that went wrong with this is entirely my fault anyway. So this was meant to be like a big triangular shawl, you know, like a big, you know, wrap it around a couple of times, cozy shawl. And I'm going to show you what I ended up with. This is what I ended up with. That's it. That's how big it is. It's not, it like barely goes around my head once to tie. I mean, I guess you could tie it if you wanted to, but it doesn't, it's definitely not what it was supposed to be. So obviously with this project, I learned about a thing called gauge. I have no idea what the original pattern's gauge would have been. I would have looked, but I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you what the gauge was because I don't remember what the pattern was. It was definitely a free pattern. Who even knows if it's still published or not? So obviously I learned a lot about gauge, and I also learned a lot about choosing needle sizes, and I also learned that acrylic doesn't really block all that well. There's a lot of debate on this. I don't want to like argue with anyone about whether acrylic does or doesn't block well. I know that you can do something called killing acrylic, where you basically like steam the bejesus out of it and basically break down the fibers. But I didn't really have access to anything like a steamer or even an iron when we lived there. So that was kind of out of the question. I did make an attempt to block it, even. It was one of my first things. So I did block it, or I made an attempt. I soaked it and I pinned it out, and I still ended up with this. This was meant to be like 4 times the size of this, and it's tiny, and it's been sitting in my bedside table. When did we come back? 7 years ago? 6 years ago? Something like that. A long time. And I only remembered it when I went looking for a book yesterday, and I was like, where the hell did I put this book? And then I thought, oh, maybe I shoved it into the nightstand drawer maybe when I was like tidying the other day, and I opened that drawer and I was like, oh my god, I completely forgot about this. So this is why I've been inspired to talk about this today, my big fails. So like, it can stretch, it just won't stay there. And also like when you do stretch it, it's just bad. Look, I can see you through it. There's a drop stitch. Oh, it actually looks like maybe, yeah, no, it's definitely a drop stitch. So there's definitely a drop stitch there. And there's also, here you can see, this is before I learned about weaving ends in properly, and I tied a knot. I know that I can feel the gasps. So I tied a knot, and you can see that the knot's fraying. Not good. So this is my first like actually following a pattern kind of project, and it didn't go well for me. I didn't know anything about gauge, or if I did, I decided to ignore it and hope for the best, which seems kind of on brand for me. So I really wouldn't be surprised if that was what happened. So it didn't turn out well. It wasn't good, but I've kept it for posterity. Also, I must have done something super weird with this like spine in the middle. It like, none of it looks even, and it's like super, like, you can't stretch that part at all. It's super firm. So I have no idea what the pattern told me to do and what I probably decided to do instead, but it's wrong. And that's probably one of the reasons why it wouldn't block, because it's just like. So then, after we got back from Ireland and I got my work authorization, I started working at a yarn company in London. And I worked at this yarn company, and while I was there, I was like, well, I should learn to crochet, really. I should know about the other, you know, sort of popular yarn craft. I should learn how to crochet. And so I learned how to crochet. It did not come easy for me. I'm fine with it now, but in the beginning, there was something about, like, I really wanted to hold the yarn, like tension the yarn with my other hand, which just doesn't really work that well with crochet. And it was, yeah, it took me like a couple of weeks to really get into the rhythm of it. And I made various like small things here and there. I don't think I made anything too dramatic. I did help out with a crochet along that had like quite intense instructions and managed to do okay with that. And it was very stressful. I find knit alongs and crochet alongs to be stressful. I suppose because there's like a weird time limit, and then you feel like, I mean, you're not really competing with people, but there is that kind of like weird tinge of competitiveness when people will be like, oh, well, the next clue came out and I'm done in 3 hours, which was never me. I'm way too slow a crafter for that. So I managed to get through that okay. And then I came up with an idea that I wanted to do like rainbow circular granny squares. Behold, a rainbow circular granny square. Again, this is all big box yarn. I'm pretty sure most of this is Rico yarn. There's a little bit of leftover Lang baby cotton bits in here. Most of it is Rico though. So with this, I learned a couple of important lessons. The first lesson is that I filmed a tutorial video for this, which I think is still somewhere on this channel, but I filmed it horribly. I filmed it like from the other side instead of like looking down at my hands. It was like looking forward at me, and it like wasn't super well put together, and I only ever got negative comments on that. And I think in the beginning I deleted them, so I don't know if any of those negative comments are still there. But it's basically people like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, like being really like aggressive and like nasty and mean about it. And I was like, okay, I'm learning, I'm sorry. Anyway, so I learned that if you're gonna film a tutorial, make sure you do it right, or people will be mean. But I learned that. I do really like the look of like a really smooth gradient. I learned that I do enjoy crocheting with cotton. I learned that I really super hate sewing in 8 million ends. I know that you can weave them in as you go. I did not know that then. I know that now. And I also learned that I really hate making many of the same thing. So obviously, this is, I think it's 4-ply. So 4-ply yarn, cotton, here's the size of the square. It's approximately face sized. So you would need a good number of these if you wanted to like have a good sized blanket, right? You'd probably need 100. I don't know, that's a wild guess. Let's say 100. You'd need 100 of these. I think I have about 20 of these, and then I was like, I don't ever want to crochet this ever again, but maybe someday. And I put them all into a box, and I thought someday I will come back to this project. I will finish my crochet cotton rainbow granny square circle square blanket, and I just never did. I never went back to it. So those 20 squares still chilling in that box, and I figure maybe somebody close to me will have a baby and then I'll sew them together and that will become a baby blanket. But I know for damn sure that I'm definitely not going to make enough of these to be an adult-sized blanket. It's not going to happen. It's not. So I learned that very important lesson, that if you don't like making the same thing a million times, don't start off with a small granny square. It's also why I would never do one of the beekeeper quilts, so like the little hexie puffs, because I know that I would be like, no. And I mean, the being able to finish something fast appeals to me, because I could get one of these done in, I don't know, an evening, you know. So that appeals to me, being able to be like, look, I finished this. But having to make the same thing over and over doesn't really appeal to me. I'm talking myself back into doing more of these. I can feel myself being like, I do like having things done. It would be good to show people on the podcast. What a great idea. I should totally resist, Ange. Resist the siren song of the rainbow cotton granny squares. I don't even know if I have no, I definitely have the yarn, but I probably don't have enough of it. Anyway, so I learned those lessons about crochet with one of my first crochet projects. So there you go. Learned how to follow a pattern, learned how to kind of write a pattern. I have to say, just as a tangent, I don't super love reading crochet patterns. I can read them, but there's something about them that I don't know. I just don't. I think that was a bird that just flew overhead. There's a bird like right over there, and I'm kind of worried that it's gonna like freak out and dive bomb me. Anyway, so that was what I learned about crochet, and oh yeah. So I don't know, there's just something about reading a crochet pattern that I find that I have to like focus on it a lot more, especially if it's a pattern where the instructions are different every row or every round, and it's not just keep doing this thing for X amount of rows or rounds or inches or what have you. That kind of thing I'm fine with, but it's when stuff is different instructions every row or round that I get like weirdly frustrated, and I'm like, why can't this just be? And I'm also not a very spatially intelligent person. I'm not very like, I can't like look at something and figure out how it's constructed. My brain straight up doesn't work that way. I can put together flat pack furniture. When it comes to like looking at something and being like, oh, I can see how that was constructed. No, can't do that. I'm also really bad at judging distance, like looking from here to the end of the balcony. I'm like, I don't know, that could be 12 feet. I don't even know, but that's probably wrong. It's probably like 8. I don't know. Like I said, I'm bad at judging distance. I don't have a lot of spatial intelligence. So that's my story about crochet. I admire people who can write crochet patterns because my brain doesn't super well work. I have written crochet patterns, but it was difficult. I guess my most popular crochet pattern that I've ever written was probably the Cthulhu dice bag, which, to be fair, is just like a tube. It's got like a bottom, and then you just like, it's just like a tube all the way up, and then you just do the little squiggly bits for the head and the tentacles. But anything beyond that is probably like not going to be something I can handle. Okay, my leg is totally falling asleep here. I'm going to show you I think this is the first garment I ever made. I'm pretty sure. No, it definitely is. This is the first garment I ever made, and it taught me a lot of really valuable lessons that were also really irritating. So, this is the Narragansett by Thea Coleman. I've showed this before on the podcast. I don't wear it very often, and I'll get to that. So, this is the first garment I ever made. It is an indie designed pattern, and I will link it down below. And I made this with drops. It's a drops yarn, and I think it's 100% alpaca in an Aran or DK weight. Aran? I think it's an Aran weight. I'm not actually sure, but it's definitely like 100% alpaca and lovely gray color. And I was able to make a garment for not stupid amounts of money, which again, super broke. Living near London, working in London, like a third of my paycheck was just going to pay on transit, getting me in and out of the office. So didn't have loads of money spare to spend on yarn. So anyway, so this is drops, which drops is a really good option if you're wanting to make garments and you don't want to spend like loads and loads and loads of money, or you want to see if you like making garments. Like, they're still legit. I have my After the Rain stripey sweater, which I've worn a few times on the podcast. It's like blue and green, and I mean, like, I've had that for ages. I've had that for like 6 years, and I wear it regularly, and it's been washed regularly, and it still stands up. It doesn't pill, it doesn't look bad or anything. So, you know, drops yarns can be a really good option for that. Anyway, so this is my Narragansett. So the first thing that I learned when knitting this is that there's a big difference. First thing that I learned is that there's a really big difference between different ways of increasing and decreasing. So I ended up with an asymmetric, it's supposed to be symmetrical. So I have holes, right, on one side of this little cable detail, which is quite cute, but then on the other side there are not holes. And as I was knitting this, I remember thinking, that's weird. Oh, it looks like I figured it out for a while down here towards the bottom. So as you can, I'm not the kind of person who's gonna rip things back. If I have to rip it back, that's it. I'm never gonna work on it ever again. I just have this very strong aversion to like repeating things or having to redo something. It's a personality flaw. And apparently I did the same thing on the sleeves. So you can see up here, not symmetrical, and then symmetrical kind of for a while, and then I messed up the other side. So I learned that there's big differences between different increases and decreases, and there's probably probably a reason why a designer writes it that way. Don't just make up your own one. So that was an important lesson to learn. The other lesson that I learned is that I really, really, really like the look of twisted rib. I love the way that twisted rib looks, but oh my god, do I hate knitting it. I absolutely hate knitting twisted rib. It's worth it because I really like how neat and tidy it looks, but it takes like a third longer than knitting regular rib, and just oof. I also learned that you should probably try things on as you're making them, garments, because I ended up with sleeves that are a little bit shorter than I would like. These sleeves go kind of to my elbow, which is fine. It's fine for what it is. I also learned that I'm lazy. These are ends that I haven't woven in 6 years-ish after I finished this garment. There's more than one. 1, 2, 3, 4 that I can see in here, sets of ends. Another lesson that I learned is about stretchy bind-offs. So I didn't know anything about bind-offs really. I just knew like just your average, your normal bind-off. And I remember I finished this and I was so proud, and I took it into work because it was a yarn company. Took it into work and I was really proud of it, and I was showing it off to everyone. Look at this amazing sweater I've made. I made this. I'm really proud of it. It's my first garment. And one of the more experienced knitters who was working in the customer service department was like, Ange, are you sure that bottom bind-off like, is it gonna be too tight around your hips? She was like, it seems really tight. And I was like, no, I'm sure it's fine. And I felt like quite defensive over my garment. And then I got home because I think I must have finished it when I was in the office, like over my lunch break or something. And I remember I brought it home and I tried it on, and guys, this is mega tight around my hips. So that was a lesson that I learned, is that to make sure that your bind off has a little bit of give, because if we just do a standard bind off, you're gonna have a sweater that stretches a lot more than your bind off does. So, and if you're somebody who's prone to weight fluctuations like I am, that's, perhaps not a great plan. I will say I'm almost positive that this was a top down. It must have been, because I think the only sweater I haven't done that was top down was my the only sweater I've ever made that wasn't top down, I'm pretty sure, was my Vinterskov, which was by Carrie Westerman. That's my neon green sort of festive wintry sweater. So this was definitely top down, and you can see that by the time I got down to the bottom of the garment, I had my shit figured out with regards to increases and decreases, and so I have the detail that's down here is even and symmetrical, whereas up here on the sleeves it was not. Especially this down here, like this, what is this? This looks like a mess. I'm sure that's meant to be I'm sure that's meant to look a lot different, but I made it look like a mess. So my final, perhaps TMI lesson that I learned from making this garment, it might be a TMI. If you don't like TMIs, you may want to turn off. It's not too bad. Anyways, the other thing that I learned is this is, like I said, this is 100% alpaca. If you're a human who tends to run hot, like I am, making yourself a garment out of 100% alpaca is perhaps not your best plan. Alpaca holds in heat like you would not believe. So I don't actually wear this sweater all that much because it has to be like super freaking cold for me in order to wear it without feeling like I'm gonna just turn into the sun and explode. So as that, even though, right, it's not even a full length sweater, it's like an elbow length sleeve, and I'm still like, So I will say, if you're somebody who runs hot, don't make something out of 100% alpaca. Now, whenever I wear knitted garments, I always tend to wear some sort of, foundation garment under it, whether it's a t-shirt or, like a cami or something, because I just feel like it'll help your natural fiber knitted things hold up a bit longer. You won't have to wash them as often. It's just a good plan. So with that in mind, I have always worn like something under this, but Okay, this is kind of gross. Why am I showing you this? I don't know why I'm showing you this. So this is the underarm of my sweater. You see that? It's felted. My underarms felted this sweater. The rest of it's not felted, just under the arms. And I can feel, you can see on the inside as well. Look at that. Felted. And felted. None of the rest of it is, just here. Lovely stitch definition and then felted. Because I was hot and gross and 100% alpaca in me, we don't play ball well. And it did on this side as well. So I felted the underarms of this sweater because it's 100% alpaca, and I don't know, I guess I didn't realize that it just like existing on my body would felt. I mean, I guess, you know, you move your arms around a bit, but I didn't realize that it would be quite that aggressive, given that I don't typically wear this very often, and I don't wear it for very long when I do wear it. So imagine my surprise when I pulled this out of the cupboard a few months back to wear it, and I was like, oh, why are the underarms of this so stiff and immovable? It's because it's felted. Because I felted it with my underarms. Because I'm a beast. I am a sweaty, gross, hot beast. Actually, no, I'm gonna take back gross. I'm just normal. I'm just hot. So that was a lesson that I learned. When I'm making myself garments, don't use alpaca because you'll felt the underarms, and nobody wants like stiff underarms under. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Nobody wants stiff underarms on their knitted garments. It's just not pleasant. It feels strange. It feels odd. And honestly, actually, when I pulled this out last time to wear it, I didn't even realize that the underarms were felted until I put it on, and I was like, feels like there's like a weird seam in my armpit, and kind of like, oh, it's felted for my underarms. Anyway, so those were some of my biggest fails. Obviously, I can't show you some of them because who knows where this stuff has ended up. Like the super early stuff from, 13, 14 years ago. I have no idea where any of that could have ended up. But I can show you this sad hunk of nothing. And that was from, I think, about 7 years ago. Yeah, about 7 years ago. So, there you go. It just shows what you can achieve if you just keep trying things that you're not necessarily good at the first time around. I definitely wasn't good at knitting the first time around, or crochet the first time around. I just kind of kept poking at it until I got better, and watching lots of tutorials on YouTube and listening to people who have really good tips. But now, there's a few things that I don't know how to do. I've never done entrelac. I feel like I'd figure it out if I sat down to do it, but it's not something that super appeals to me. I've done brioche. Admittedly, I've only done one color brioche, not two, but I feel like I could manage if, I feel like once you got brioche down, you can probably tackle, the other brioches. And I have done lace. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy making lace, and I don't enjoy wearing lace, so it's not really something that I gravitate towards. I don't like making it because, again, it's one of those I have to look at the pattern every row, otherwise I get confused and I forgot what I'm doing and it's bad. And I'm not really somebody who typically likes to wear things that have lace patterns, so it's a good mutual distancing relationship. I do really like cables, like any cables. I adore cables. Give me wildly complicated traveling cables, I'll be yours forever. I love a cable. I really like color work. My first few attempts with color work were yikes. The floats were terrible. My first attempts with intarsia were awful. I can't show them to you because those got pulled out and are now piles of yarn. I don't even think they're in my stash anymore. I think with those I was so frustrated that I pulled it out and gave the yarn away. I can't even look at the yarn anymore. But I really enjoy color work. Hopefully I'll be able to show you. I know I keep mentioning this. At some point I will show you my Fur Fox State sweater. And I've gotten better at intarsia. I'll be able to show you my Volt sweater at some point. I still only have the ribbing. I'm a disaster who never finishes projects apparently anymore. I don't know. It's fine. I keep seeing loads of people finishing things. They're like, yeah, we're in lockdown. I'm doing so much knitting. I'm doing so much crochet. Look at all my millions of finished projects. And I'm here like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start something else new and ignore all of the projects that I have that are, nearing completion. I'm just gonna not finish those. I don't know. A therapist would probably have a lot to say about that. Anyway, so that's all I have for you today. I hope that you thought that this was funny. Drop me a comment down below and tell me about some of your biggest knitting or crochet fails or biggest lessons that you learned from projects. And I will be back here next week with another post. And please do like and subscribe and tap the bell for notifications if you would like to be notified whenever I post a video or whenever we go live on YouTube, which is every Saturday night. And we've been going from We've been going from 8 p.m. every Saturday night instead of 9 p.m. during this lockdown for COVID-19 for people who need a little bit of extra socializing. They need a place to just kind of chat about crafts or food or their week or whatever have you, or games, etc. So we've been starting from 8 p.m. British summer time or standard time, whatever London time is. We've been starting from 8 p.m. so do come join us if you haven't, and if you have joined us before then I would love to see you there again. I'm not sure what we are playing this weekend, but I'm sure it'll be something fun. Sarah usually picks a good game. Thank you for joining me on this podcast, and I will see you next week.